mics are on. Oh, they are on. Do we have an echo?
No,
No.
just loud.
Okay. So it is 7:03 PM, and I am calling the July 1st, 2025 Planning Board meeting to order. So this meeting is being recorded by HW Cam, and I'll start with roll call. So when I call your name, please indicate that you're present. Pat Norton,
Present.
Jonathan Poor.
Jonathan Poor, present.
I know for the record that Bill Wheaton will not be in attendance. Beth Herr.
Here.
I know Darcy Dale will not be here. Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist here.
Marnie Crouch here. Matt Hamel, no.
Yeah, and I don't think Jeff is going to be here either.
Jeff, no. So we do have a quorum.
Do we have anybody online?
Do we have anyone online?
Okay.
The town is not interested, apparently. So, we have now taken roll, we have a quorum, and if no one has any objection, I am going to take the public hearing, the continued hearing on the tree removal application, if you will, that's being presented by TEC. That was continued from June 3rd?
Yes.
So if representatives from TEC or the town are here, we can go forward with the scenic road hearing so that you're not inconvenienced by our other board business.
Good evening. Tim Olson, DPW Director. Jason is with TEC. He's the designer. He can answer technical questions. But we come before the planning board as a continuation we're trying to move ahead with some projects, roadway projects that we have planned, hopefully this fall. In order to do so, we have some requirements to remove 2 trees along Bridge Street to improve the drainage on the lower Bridge Street area between Bay Road and Miles River. Constant drainage, flooding issues. We're trying to improve those with some subsurface drainage, catch basins, some drain pipe, and where the 2 trees need to be removed would be our outfall structure into the Miles River. He has a plan. I'm not sure if you've seen it before, but that's kind of the extent of the tree removal. We are also planning repaving and drainage improvements along Miles River as well, another scenic road, with there's no tree removal on that section of roadway. There was a tree that was removed on Miles River. It was down close to the intersection of Bridge Street and Miles River. That was removed prior to the winter. It had major defects in it, and it was a risk during our winter season. So I made the executive decision to remove that tree prior to winter. But that is, I guess, noted on the narrative as a difference from the previous meeting. We've also had a resident come before us from 14 Bridge Street. There's 3, I believe, pear trees in front of their house. They claim that it has leaf spot disease. I did not have time to get them evaluated by our professional arborist, but I will do that, and I would also like, I guess, permission or approval from the planning board to remove those trees if necessary and if they actually are diseased, for me to not have to come before you again. I would not remove those trees if they are deemed to be healthy, only if they're diseased and danger to other surrounding vegetation.
Okay, so those 2 pear trees, they are in the public way. They're not on these property owners' property.
They are in the public way.
Okay, because it
Yes.
wouldn't make sense for the town to
Yep.
pay to remove trees on private property.
Right.
No,
Which
the
is-
outfall structure is within the right-of-way of Bridge Street.
Right, but the pear trees are,
The 3 pear trees?
Yeah.
They are in the right-of-way as well. They're
Yeah.
just in front of 14 Bridge Street. Just a request from the resident for us, I guess, to look at it and to remove them if diseased.
right. So you're seeking approval for the removal of a tree this winter, which technically, I guess you should have come before us on that because it is a scenic route. So you want
Yeah.
approval for what happened in the past and approval for what might happen in the future.
Right.
As well as the 2 trees that are clearly within the scope of the
That's
project.
correct. Yeah, and, I mean, we can talk about how I'm gonna move on trees that are dangerous. I don't sometimes have time to come before the planning board. If we have winter storms approaching and we see a defect in a tree, we're gonna remove it prior to, it just happens that way. We're
Well,
gonna,
of
you
course,
know,
I
so-
mean, if it poses a danger
Yeah,
and could
that's the only reason
potentially
why.
fall on an automobile or a pedestrian, obviously, you want to act expeditiously.
Yep.
I think maybe as a point of clarification, you should come within 4 to 6 weeks to get the approval for what you've done instead of waiting too long, just because it is one of our bylaws.
Yep,
Just
no,
just being a stickler here.
No, I mean, scenic trees and along public shade trees along scenic roads are definitely important. They do age, they do live and die, and my job as a tree warden is to take care of them,
Right,
if
right.
needed. But I do understand. One thing we also have is we've been given some money to plant new trees.
Oh, good, good.
So I'll work with Jason and TEC to see if there's some areas along both stretches of roadway
Perfect.
to replant some. Obviously, we'll try to replant as many as we can, but try to at least replant what we take out, so.
Yeah, and those Bradford pears, I guess they are now a prohibited species.
If I don't know what species they are, but if they are truly those, that's something I'll have, Sequoia Tree is our tree expert right now, our professional opinion. I'll get Mark to look at them.
Just remember, my parents planted a pear tree and regretted it. It was great for a couple years, and then it was a problem, and then it had to be removed.
I brought it up with the guys today in the DPW, and they remember planting those trees. So
Oh,
it was a
really?
town tree, trees that we planted,
Well, they're
so,
beautiful when they're beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, they have,
so. There's a little bit of schmoozing that we have to do, because they did hard work to plant those trees. I don't want to take them before I get accurate information from a
right.
That's smart.
professional arborist,
Right.
so.
Do any other planning board members have any questions?
I just have a curiosity question, not about the trees, if you'll bear with me. I'm just curious, I know on Bridge Street, there's been some ongoing drainage issues from the new development there, and I think that the water crosses over the surface of the foot of Mill River, Miles River Road. And I was just looking at the drawings, and I was just wondering, I see further up Bridge Street, you have a way of the water crossing the road. Just curious if any of I know it has nothing to do with your responsibility, if any of your strategies will help manage the drainage that's being problematic
Well,
further up Bridge Street.
it could, repaving.
I know that wasn't the
No,
design
I
intent.
got
It's just
you.
a
I mean,
idle curiosity.
And it's a point taken. That's been a challenge there. Looking at Miles River, looking at that intersection, there are things that we possibly can do to increase the drainage off of Miles River, but also intercept some of that drainage coming off. There are catch basins. We
Right.
just need to kind of pull the water as best we can to get to those catch basins.
Yeah, and I noticed there was sheet runoff on the road heading down to the Mill River when that area was overrun, and I'm assuming that part is gonna be addressed. It's just that you can't address the drainage in front of those new developments.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do the best we can in that intersection to try to, like I said, control and force that water to the sides of the roadway or to the catch basins to get them obviously then in the underground system.
Right, and is there any dialogue with those developers in conjunction with this process, or that's separate?
I would say that's separate, just my role, I mean, what I plan to do is stay within the right-of-way to
Yep.
try to do some of that. I don't plan to go on private property or I try to address everything as it comes into the roadway itself or from the roadway. So
Yep.
I can kind of work with the building department as well to see what their overall strategy was in, the final piece.
Yeah.
to see if there's anything we can do there, but I think by maybe reshaping or restructuring the intersection there, I think we might be able to control some of that runoff prior to it going across the intersection.
Yeah.
So I'll
yeah.
take a
So
look at it.
again, it completely off the subject, and I know it's not in the scope of work, but I just was curious while you were here to ask about it.
Yeah, I mean, it always makes sense to talk with them and see if we can work together, or if there's something that we can do and, as a design team to see if we can improve that. It's never a good situation to have that sheet flowing across an intersection.
Right.
Obviously, icing and things like that, so.
Right. That's all, thanks.
So the project itself is still in front of the CONSCOM.
Yeah, we'll have to go in front of the Concom. They actually, talking to Jason a little bit before this, they wanted us to come before you first.
Want us to approve the tree removal associated with the project before the project gets approved?
Correct, yeah, they requested that we come before the planning board in order to properly permit the trees the 2 trees that we need removed for the drainage outlet, which is a new location for the drainage, in order to properly convey everything at the right elevation
I see,
and
yeah.
into the actual larger wetland.
And is that area proposed work around these 2 trees to be removed in the wetland boundary or not?
No, it'll all be outside of the wetlands, and it's actually located at a point in where the right-of-way is actually sort of wide due to the curvature of the road, and the right-of-way is sort of linear. So it provided a very good location to get the outlet in and have proper stone to
Okay.
prevent erosion before it enters the wetland.
So it kind of makes sense that they would want us to approve the tree removal, because the tree removal is required to
Right.
meet the conditions of your design
Correct.
intent. and
Exactly.
Otherwise, you'd have to move this,
Right,
the structure.
exactly.
Yeah, okay. And this is the ideal location of the structure based on whatever
Based on space,
you have to treat.
based on space and right-of-way width, so we can, yeah, I mean, so the structure is then there'll be an outfall. So the structure that we're talking about is like a water quality
Water quality swale.
vault.
Yep, it's, a large concrete structure that will,
Like a storm scepter.
yeah, it'll treat all the water prior to it exiting into the wetlands. So that, as I mentioned, the right-of-way width that we do have in that area was the perfect location. And since the slope of the road is very steep in that area, in order to get the pipe to outlet, we need that extra right-of-way room in order to not have to pursue any permanent easements on private property.
Thank you.
Any other questions for these gentlemen?
Can I ask one more off the subject question? Sorry. Again, given the fact that the Bridge Street process isn't really done, and it could add a load to your storm scepter at that discharge point, is there any sort of provision for monitor? I know it's not in the design, but it's more a DPW question, provision for monitoring more frequently to make sure that it's not overrun,
Yeah, I
clogged.
mean, we have some new structures out on Tobacco. We have, as part of that project, we have some maintenance, proper maintenance for the new structures, variety of locations. This would be one of them.
Yep.
I don't see too much of the Bridge Street drainage making it to that structure because of the outlet or the existing culvert is the low spot. This is on the kind of the uphill of that more towards Bay Road, but we'll look at it, all these structures annually and get them maintenanced or cleaned or whatever we have to do to keep them optimal.
Yeah, is that, will you be back before us then for a stormwater permit?
No, we're staying within the right-of-way, and it's less than an acre of disturbance.
So you don't
It's
need-
just paving, and we're just doing some drain work,
The
so.
CONSCOM be the one to condition any maintenance requirements or anything like that?
They would do maintenance requirements on the storm scepter,
Yeah.
for
Right.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah. probably similar to what I was mentioning before with the
Sure.
Tobacco Road, so.
So,
So I move, can I make a motion?
Go ahead.
Make a motion that we approve the removal of the 2 trees being discussed. I guess it's along Bridge Street, isn't it? Or is it on Miles River Road? Are the trees actually on Bridge Street or Miles River Road?
They're on Bridge where we're putting the outfall,
Yeah.
or the outlet, the water quality. Then there was 3 others that we was talking about earlier that are on
Pear
Bridge
trees.
Street as
Yeah.
well, in front of 14.
Yeah.
And then that one that I took earlier on Miles River.
So
Well,
motion to
Moss
approve.
River actually, is Moss River a scenic road?
Yep.
Oh, okay,
Oh, sorry.
okay, good.
Motion to approve the tree removal requested along Bridge Street to support the improvements project. In addition to potentially the pear trees, if you deem them necessary or appropriate to remove. Hopefully with the condition that you'll plant new ones. Not necessarily pear trees, but something else.
second?
Right, so it's really a motion to approve the application.
Yes.
Second, so when I call your name, please indicate that you approve of this application. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Porter, aye.
Beth Her,
Aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. So now we can turn to approval of the minutes. We'll first consider the minutes from April 8th. And Jonathan, did you have a problem with those minutes, even though they
I
have
would just
been-
note that some of the attributions are still not quite right, but the statements are correct, so I just pass them as they are.
Did anyone else have any issues with the minutes from April 8th?
No.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I move we approve the meeting minutes of April 8, 2025.
Second?
I think since we don't have any members online, we can just raise our hand. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous?
One person online,
Lily,
Lily.
not a member.
Oh, yeah, but that's not a planning board
Not a
member.
planning board member. So those minutes are approved. Now we can turn to the
That was a
minutes of
clarification.
April 29th. And
Great.
Emil, you had an issue with those?
Yes, April 29, it was on page 1 of 3, down at the bottom, vote. Mr. Wheaton made a motion to leave the zoning of the carriage lane area intact to its original proposed form, Bay Road mixed use. The planning board voted 4 to 3 to 0 by roll call in favor. It's a little, the language is a little garbled there. The motion, it's too bad Bill's not here, but the motion that he made was to change the carriage lane area from its current zoning to the proposed Bay Road mixed use category, and I believe that was the motion and the vote.
So we will have to forward that correction to Mark. So we'll have to continue the minutes from April 29th until, well, if that's the only one, we could approve those minutes on the condition that that vote is clarified.
The wording.
It says to leave the zoning area intact to its current proposed form. So it was being proposed at that point currently.
But I think that the vote was
The
that
vote
it
was
would become
to
part
change-
of
to
the Bay
change it.
Road mixed use.
Yeah, that was the 4 to 3 vote.
Perhaps what we should do is advise Mark to listen to the transcript and make sure that's
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll continue that as well.
Okay.
May 13th, I did have some minor edits to those minutes, and I will forward them to Mark. Did anyone else have any corrections to those minutes?
No.
Mine were essentially stylistic. I corrected the reference to Mass General laws, the citation was inaccurate. And then I just had a few other very minor edits, but I can pass them on to Mark. The minutes from May 20th are missing, and then the only other set of minutes was from June 3rd. Is there any discussion about those minutes? I had some, again, some stylistic issues, not many, but we can get them clarified. But one problem that I identified, it's in the middle on the first page, referring to the table of use regulations. It says the table of use. It's really the table of use regulations identified the planning board as the responsible entity, but it needs to be the zoning board of appeals. That was reversed. I think what we intended was that the planning board would be the responsible entity for
Correct.
all the new sub-districts, and the planning board would replace the ZBA. So again, those minutes have to be corrected, and given that we have all the minutes coming back to us, we might as well
Wait and vote later.
wait and vote on all of them.
Great.
Okay. So I'll send my corrections to Mark.
Great.
Okay. So the only other item on our agenda is a discussion of the July 14th, 2025 special town meeting. One of the items that the board is considering including with the materials at town meeting is the flow diagram that Emil prepared. And I actually think in its present format, it's really clear. I do not think it contains opinion. I think it's quite factual.
That's not the final one, though.
Oh, is it?
That's not the final one.
I don't,
No,
yeah.
it's not the
Do we
one
have
sent.
copies here? I saw them online, but I don't see it here.
Emil, you don't have your computer
I do, I
hooked
can,
up, do you?
I can look it up.
Okay.
The one I sent around,
So this, where did I get this one then?
that was the one Mark, maybe, the one he was working off.
While Emil pulls that up, could we talk kind of in principle about other materials and presentation at town meeting, and sort of what needs to be vetted by the board and what doesn't need to be?
Right, and that unfortunately is going to be quite difficult because the FinCom, the planning board, I doubt the select board has any materials, but UTIL, I believe, is presenting some information. So I know Joe has tried to organize a meeting of all the different people that may have a role at town meeting to try and coordinate the presentation. So I don't know if those of you who are on Facebook saw the FinCom's the material that they are proposing to include as an appendix to the warrant or as part of the warrant. So they have their materials prepared. We don't know what UTIL is going to do.
Right.
And so
If anything,
through this whole process, we're always a little bit the last to know. So we're a little bit the last to know.
Yeah.
I think that, from my point of view, that the planning board should focus its efforts on educating the voters at town meeting how the form-based code is a protective measure for the town with respect to Article 1, which is the article which will bring the town into compliance with 3A. So,
Can you admit this, Pat?
Sure, yeah. I don't know why this is way over here.
Marty, this is the one.
Oh, yeah, I think you have to leave it over there, though, so we don't get the feedback from it.
All the volumes
I
on
sent it
Yeah,
around.
I was like, I started, yeah.
On the weekend, I think I sent it.
I think the volume is on the
I can enlarge it if you
laptop.
want to read it.
I don't hear an echo.
We added these two
Yeah, I was starting to hear Marnie, though.
Oh.
to the first vote.
And then there was somebody who was trying to get on. Yeah, we got them in.
It's recommended by
right.
That was what started it, well, ish.
Did Mark have a comment? So while we're waiting for that, again, to,
Well, I'll
To-
repeat my point, though. I think that even though I had it in front of me, a slightly outdated version of the flow diagram, I don't think that the flow diagram actually contains anything that's not factual.
it's mechanics, it's really the mechanics of the vote.
It's the mechanics of what happens with
Yes.
the vote. I have it here.
Yes, agreed. So, and then to play off of what you just said before, the planning board's role should be to help people understand the role of form-based code in managing 3A and managing the rest of the downtown. What I think would be a useful strategy, if the rest of the team is in line with it, is for any technical questions or challenges around the town's relationship to 3A, they really should be directed to town council, not to the planning board.
Right.
The
And-
planning board should focus on planning and the metrics around planning,
and
not the
so-
legal permutations or speculations on 3A. That should
And that
all
will be,
go,
that'll be Robin Stein?
or whoever the representative is.
Todd McEnany is usually at town meeting. But,
So I'd like to just promote that
well,
Right, I
so.
and make sure that the planning board is in line with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but so let's just review here. The select board controls the warrant, and Bill Bowler actually, I think, controls the conduct of
Understood.
the special town
Yep,
meeting.
yep.
So Joe has set up a meeting on Monday.
Yep.
To have all the different participants discuss their presentations, and that is something that you will have to confirm at that time. It's not
course.
something that the planning board, we can recommend it.
That's what I'm getting
Makes
to here, is could
It makes
the planning
perfect
board get behind that
sense.
recommendation?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's a
That's smart.
legal issue,
Yes.
then town council should address it.
Yes.
If it's a planning issue, particularly a form-based code planning issue, the planning
Yes.
board should
Yes.
address it.
Agreed.
And if it's a straight 3A compliance issue, then if UTIL is there, I think UTIL
Yes.
should address that, because they are the ones who ran the compliance models that the executive office.
Agreed. And I just wanted to make sure the board is behind that approach. And I know that Bill Bowler will be the final say in that, but I wanted to make sure that the planning board supports that approach.
I'd
I
be-
support that approach.
Be a little leery about using word like this code will protect it, because that's subjective. Like, I think it's really good to explain what it does in action, but to say it protects there is a little bit of subjectiveness in that. We could say, there's a lot of options on how you can adopt this, and we chose this route because of these reasons, but to say that it protects is
It
pretty
prevents.
absolute.
If you don't want to use the word protect, it prevents any type of development that's fundamentally at odds with the existing scale of our downtown.
I'd say even that's like, I would say that it restricts it to these, like the.
They're
form-based
numbers.
code
There are
restricts it to
numbers.
These things.
There are
Restricts it to this, restricts it to this.
And they work
tuck
in,
to the form, but I wouldn't say what the form does. I wouldn't say that it is, I don't even say it
Yeah,
is within the character of downtown.
Well,
'Cause that's
even
subjective.
last week when Bill was talking about, it'll never get built, I'm like, we should not be saying that as a planning board. That's not our job. So I think to your point, I think that's helpful to just really parse through some of this to make sure that we're clear on what we are saying and not.
so let's tackle that for just a moment. I think it was in Mark's FAQs, and I don't know whether Mark is online there.
No.
And he actually compared the maximum open space, the required open space, the maximum lot coverage, and the footprint size of the building, comparing the current code and the form-based code on a typical 1 acre lot, right? And gave the metrics. That's in his FAQ. And those are numbers. Those aren't opinions.
Right.
And when you look at the numbers say that it's a smaller building with more open space. That's a fact. It's not an opinion. It's a metric. And the planning board should be able to say that. That's a fact. So on a given lot, for example, a 1 acre lot, under the current zoning, there's less protection if you say that a bigger building is less desirable than a smaller building. There is more protection under the form-based code than there is under the current zoning.
Yeah, you
So-
could say it limits construction to a particular footprint,
Yes,
a particular height,
yes.
a
So,
particular number of square feet, more so than the existing downtown
Yes.
code does. Yeah.
yes. So if limiting size is a protection, the answer is yes. If limiting size isn't a protection, then that's subjective. So,
Right. Well,
so
the
those are
other-
just numbers.
This is unfortunate because Mark is on vacation, obviously, so he sent me some FAQs, and I think he sent it to Jonathan because Jonathan is going to be presenting at town meeting. But-
Oh, right, because I hadn't seen the
But
FAQs.
one
Yeah,
of the things
right.
he put in his materials is that there are only 5 lots in all of the downtown that exceed 1 acre.
And that's another fact. That's not an opinion.
I didn't realize Jonathan was, I came tonight because I was
I'm going to-
afraid that if I didn't show up, you guys would nominate me.
Right.
Because I'm here.
We can nominate you.
I mean, Bill Wheaton's not here.
See, I'll be in Switzerland, and
I
so,
mean, with the extreme.
Yeah, she did. She had spent a lot of money to get out of this.
Country.
I spent a lot of money to get out of this.
I didn't volunteer for this.
You're voluntold.
I was volunteered.
Yes, so I don't know if you were there at the Council on Aging, but it was like, everyone was very silent, but I mean,
We all stepped back. Jonathan stayed still.
but so here are the 5 parcels that are 1 acre or larger. The condominiums on Willow Street, 100 Willow Street, 121 Railroad Avenue, that's the Housing Authority, 121 Bay Road, that's Cumberland Farms,
Yep.
203 Willow, that's offices, and 281 Willow, I believe, is probably Dodge Tree.
Dodge Tree.
Yeah.
But that's also, that's also fuzzy. I'm not sure that's a really good, because lot lines can change, lots can be combined.
Oh,
You can still do a
absolutely, but
development on
in
a half-acre lot,
but
you
in
can still do-
terms of,
Yeah.
to do a Section 3A development, you need an acre.
Yeah, but the acreage is there in the
Yeah,
the
but,
zones that we've established.
of
so I
course,
think-
but, you would have
Yeah.
to aggregate
Yep.
small lots.
Yep.
And the point that Bill made at the last meeting is that when you go to aggregate lots that are owned individually, That isn't necessarily going to happen within a 2 months period of time unless the developer were to propose to pay way over fair market value. So if you look at the properties on Willow Street, some of them are very nice and it's in what we are calling downtown residential. So if you were to try and aggregate that, you would be having to pay at least, in my estimation, and it's a guesstimation, but it's one based on my study of the real estate market in Hamilton, at least $600,000 per house. So you want to aggregate all those, then demolish those houses, then build a septic system, then build the units, which would cost, my guess,
What
Jonathan,
I'd
tell
like,
me I'm
yeah,
wrong.
what I'd like to do is,
All I'm saying is that when you put all those pieces together,
I,
it's not like the,
I agree, and there's something overarching on top of that, which is, yes, you could speculate that that wouldn't happen. What if it did happen? Which has more protection, the current zoning or form-based code? Not an opinion, a metric. You can do the calculations. You could say, what if they aggregated it into 3 acres? What if they aggregated it into 5 acres? What if they aggregated into 1.75 acres? Do the math for the current, under the current zoning versus the form-based code. There's specific metrics. If size of buildings, position of buildings in relationship to each other, positions of buildings in relation to the street, and placement of parking and screening of parking is considered more protection or less protection. If those are your criteria, the form-based code offers more protection.
And that
It's
is
a fact. It's a
that's-
number.
that is actually something that might be helpful to do. Because I'm looking at it as a developer would. I mean, can I make money if I do this? But
Right.
you're looking at it, and if the developer did decide to do that.
That's really what matters.
That's
Everything
what
else is
matters.
speculation.
Right.
Everything else is
Right.
speculation, and I would like to avoid having any conversation about that at the public meeting. I'd like to stick with the metrics, not speculation.
Well,
I don't want to, I personally don't want to render an opinion about what's likely or not likely. We don't know what's likely. What we do know is what metrics we've put in place to govern potential change. That's what matters.
Right.
But we do know that any development in Hamilton is circumscribed by the absence of a public sewer system.
Yeah,
So, anything
course.
like that. So the,
And the fact that it's all built up and there's no vacant lots and there's only 5 one-acre lots. Yes, those are all facts.
the facts.
But if we get into speculation of what about aggregating properties, yes, somebody could do that. Does it make economic sense? Probably not, but we can't really comment on that.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the FAR that averages everything out.
Yeah.
Whether it's a small lot or a large
Yeah.
lot, there's only so many square feet you can build in an acre.
Right.
Whether it's 1 lot or 5 lots.
So I'm just, it'll be very easy to go down rabbit holes
Yeah.
at the town meeting. Everybody will want to get up and go down those rabbit holes.
Well,
I don't, as a,
guarantee-
if I'm on a panel or if I'm speaking, I don't want to go down those rabbit holes.
Right.
Right, no, but you don't want to go down those rabbit holes, but I think that there will be people at town meeting who
Absolutely.
will be.
You bet. They'll be deep, neck deep in those rabbit holes, so.
There was already a text thread that, not a text thread, but a text went out today to a number of people in town with information saying it's, hold on. I did not get the text directly, but somebody sent it to me. They said that this is a modest update to our zoning plan. And what else did they say? Modest amount of new homes for Hamilton's senior citizens, teachers, and young people wanting to return home after college. And if our community does not approve this plan, the town meeting, we will lose critical funding from the state for important projects. So, I mean, there's already, again, there's all these speculations even in that, so.
I thought, going back to Emil's flow chart, I thought the information was good to have. I wondered if people would then like pre-program a voting cadence, because the vote might be a different vote. It might not be Article 1, Article 2, it might be Article 1, and then whether or not to hold, you know what I mean? There might be and people are gonna have to pay attention to that, of course, in a
Yeah.
meeting, and whether it's a vote to, you know, to vote on Article 2, or whether it's a vote to turn it back to the planning board for further development, or whatever it is. I think it's good to have it in the presentation. I wondered whether or not it was a good thing to have as a handout. That was the question I had, because it then, like, pre-programs.
The flow chart you're talking about as a handout?
Yeah, sorry.
I think the idea was to try to have that as a handout and a slide.
Yes, both. That would
Both.
probably be right. Now,
Yeah, belt and suspenders.
in the interest of fairness, Darcy has some issues with the flow chart.
Yeah.
She asked that I read her entire email. I'm going to summarize it. With respect to Article 1, she makes the point that any type of funding is never guaranteed. Of course, that's true. And Hamilton, if it's not 3A compliant, will lose the 4 sources of funding that are set forth in the statute itself, and then its status as non-compliant can be used as a factor with respect to discretionary funding. But discretionary funding is just that. Even if we were compliant, we might not get it. And that, I think, was Darcy's point, that all funding is
Right, all these sources, we
Right.
may or may not get.
right. And then with respect to Article 2, she says, how does voting for the form-based code protect the town? And that's what we're talking about. And she says the planning board should demonstrate in what ways it's supposed to protect. Just saying it does, just saying so does not make it so. So that
But I
was
think
our
that's what we were
task.
talking about, yeah.
Exactly. And she says much of the information in the chart is speculative, and I respectfully disagree with her on that. It is really just an outline of what happens if the town votes one way or the other way on each article. There's a ramification from each vote, and it is what it is. I mean, if we vote no on Article 1, we're non-compliant. If we vote yes on Article 1, we are compliant. But then that goes to Article 2, and how do they play together? So
Right.
this flow chart is really, it clarifies what happened when we pulled section 9.7 and 9.8 that UTIL produced apart to reflect the majority and 2/3 voting
Right.
requirements.
I'm wondering, I know we were talking about a handout and a slide. I know sometimes when you're teaching a class, if you give something out before people are ready to digest it, it could be a distraction. So I don't know how to better do it, but I'm wondering, I think that's kind of what Pat was asking, if we were gonna hand it out, because I think people could then get distracted and be reading this and not hearing the background, and not maybe just put the flow chart up when we're talking about the flow chart. I don't know, I go back and forth on whether we have a handout or not, because I do think it could raise a lot more questions that might be answered in real time. But if we hand it to them, they're gonna be like trying to figure it out, and they're gonna be confused,
Well,
possibly. I don't know, I'm just,
this is there are 2 votes at this town meeting. It's
Right.
not like it's buried in.
I know, no, I'm just trying to think about the best way to get people to stay focused, because it is a lot of information.
Well, I think people having it in their hand is helpful.
Okay,
Now, again, Darcy disagrees. She's not in favor of either of this. She doesn't think this is the way to go. But this is how, she can respond at town meeting. I don't think that her opinion as to this affects the utility of the flow diagram.
okay. She's not, are you saying that she said she doesn't think we should use a flow diagram, or you're saying she
Well,
disagrees?
She doesn't agree with Article 1 and 2, so
Okay.
but that's not the flow diagram.
Okay, got it.
Flow diagram, again, is the mechanics of the vote.
The
Yeah,
mechanics.
yeah.
I still think it's good with the dialogue, and standing alone on its own provides limited value. I think it's good in a presentation. I think it's good with dialogue. It's a visual that supports a conversation, but to have it stand alone as a document to provide guidance, I think is not useful.
Well, actually, can I just, it's for the benefit of all those people who are nearsighted. If you're in the back of the auditorium, you can't see the
You get
slides.
Jonathan's booming voice.
But you can't, I never could read the slides. I mean, I loved it when they put all the numbers up
Yeah.
there. I couldn't read one of them. So I think having it in hand is really helpful. I speak for those who need glasses and have challenged acuity. So,
I think it's also useful to have people read it and ask a question about it. In other words, if you have it in your hand, you've heard all sorts of things about whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. If you're reading something like the flow chart, which, as Jonathan's correctly said, it's the mechanics of the process. But if you have a question about that mechanics, at least this might trigger a good question from the audience. Anyway, that's, I think, the usefulness of a handout, just to prompt people to start thinking about what they're going to vote on, and then have the opportunity to ask a question.
yes, so unfortunately, I'm not sure, again, we are really hampered in our discussions tonight, and we've been hampered all along by getting information a little bit too little, too late. And now, because of the fact that time is running so short, we can't, other than this flow chart, we can't really even discuss what the planning board might show, because it's really contingent on what Util, assuming that, and I think Matthew said he was going to be there. That's my recollection.
Well, I
So-
think he provided those slides to Mark, and he may consider that his contribution.
Well, we'll see.
That's my question, is.
Yeah, so
I don't
again,
know.
but it's up in the air. That was
Yeah.
part of his commitment, though.
It was part of the RFQ,
Yeah,
actually. He
so,
was
yeah.
committed to doing all they could possibly do at the
Yeah.
town meeting.
I think my recollection is, I'd have to go and listen to the
Last,
YouTube video,
yeah.
but that he was
Okay.
planning to appear. So depending on what he intends to present, that affects how,
That was at the end of the last meeting, right? Was it at the end of the last meeting that we were talking about? I'm just gonna see if I can find this.
it might have been the
Transcript.
joint select board
Could have been a
meeting,
joint meeting, yeah.
the last meeting.
I think we should, it's a great, I mean, it's, regardless of how it gets utilized, it's a nice visual. and
It is.
visual. I think leaving it up to the team that meets on Monday, with Joe and the rest of the folks, let you guys all hash it out, whether or not it stands alone in the presentation or makes
Yeah.
its way into the pamphlet.
Ultimately, Bill Bowler, I guess, gets to have final say over what does and doesn't get included and whether it gets edited.
Yeah,
So-
the select board controls the warrant, and my understanding is he control, he's he's the town moderator, and he makes sure that everything flows. And so, in terms of, I think that we can agree the planning board's focus should be on the metrics in the form-based code
Yes.
versus what the metrics are, or lack there, or not, as the case may be, for the business district and, potentially the commercial, the Willow Street overlay district, because those two districts, the overlay district and the business district, will be eliminated if Article 2 passes. And so it's fair game to compare the existing metrics, or lack thereof, with what happens with the form-based code components in the proposed zoning.
Well, the comparison is useful, so you can see that whether you're getting more or less,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that's people's biggest fear,
Yeah.
is that somehow the downtown will just be irrevocably changed.
Right.
In a bad way. And I personally think that it might be changed in a very positive way over time, if this form-based code goes into effect, because we have areas of the downtown that don't function very well. The intersection of Bay Road and Walnut Street That's not a pretty intersection. That's not welcome to Hamilton. And so all those types of components of the form-based code can improve the public space. It can improve walkability, and I think it could have a very positive impact on the town in the long term. And who knows what will happen in the long term? I mean, it's always up in the air.
So was there anything else we needed to,
No.
no? Did you want to, the one person has made a comment online, I guess.
Okay.
Form-based
Regarding
code,
the form-based code and its protection or lack thereof on the,
on the Asbury
for
Street
Asbury District.
overlay district. So should we just read those aloud for, I'll read them for public record. Form-based code doesn't do anything for the Asbury section, correct? And then form-based code provides structure in downtown, but there's no protection for Asbury, correct? It gives the state control over zoning once we approve 3A. The EOHLC has to approve it. We have to assume it all will be built, so 3A has to be looked at in totality. Yes, question mark.
Well, we
Well-
did change the metric on the Asbury Street overlay district.
Yeah, there is no form-based code on
There
Asbury.
is no
Right.
form-based code.
That's
Oh.
conventional coding.
But we changed that metric. Bill
But there are
Wheaton suggested
limitations on
the
that.
reduction in the,
In the size of,
Size.
yeah,
Building
of the
size.
buildings, yeah.
And square footage.
it's just a question of the word protection again and
Yeah.
how that might be interpreted.
well, on Asbury Street, that overlay district is, well,
I think the word protection is kind of a reaction to conventional zoning, where people are just continually surprised at what gets built, and I'm not talking about Hamilton, but in different places that I had no idea it was gonna look like that, or it was gonna be that big, so I think the idea of protection is kind of a continuation of that, kind of a very common held theme that zoning does very little to actually,
And maybe that's,
Create the places.
maybe that's a point we could bring up in the presentation, which is, if you consider protection to be limiting the size of buildings so that they're similar to what you're used to,
yeah,
controlling where parking goes, controlling the position of buildings in relationship to one another so they look similar to what you're used to on the whatever frontage we're talking about. If those are protections, that's what form-based code does.
yeah. I like your comment, though.
I think you've
that-
got to keep in
I
mind.
think you're right on the word, because it has connotations.
Yes, so that's why I think it should be defined.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying maybe part of the presentation should be to say, if you think the word protection means, then form-based code does this. If protection means something else, then,
Yeah, it's not neutral necessarily.
Right.
At all.
so if you said,
Well, what-
protection for me is not a single additional family may move into Hamilton. If that's
Yeah.
your definition of protection, no, there's no protection here. Another family could move into Hamilton.
Yeah.
So, but if your idea of protection is, no big box buildings, no buildings floating in a sea of asphalt, no
Yeah.
triple wide curb cuts with cars backing into strollers, if those are protections, yes. Right now, you do not have those protections. All those things could happen.
Right.
And form-based code actually prevents those things from happen, not in theory, but in metrics.
right.
But in the inverse, I took my kids fishing over in Chabaco last weekend. And I thank God for the special permit process and this board for having been able to not allow that development to move forward. So in my mind, protection is a special permit process that's managed by an elected board of very intelligent individuals that helps to do what we did. I mean, in my mind, we're taking away that protection. So I think that's another inverse way to
Well,
define protection.
we're not actually taking it away. The
State is taking,
Commonwealth,
I understand.
in
but-
Well, we've recommended it, though. We've
No, no.
recommended to comply with it.
well, but
We've
But that- it's
recommended to
just-
comply with it.
It's just
Right.
another way, but that's irrelevant. I think it's just,
Yeah.
again, the way you define protection.
right, but it
Find it
isn't,
in a special permit process, or do you find it by
Well, we also,
Form-based
it's
code
not
process.
as if
It's- but
3A
the-
doesn't have site plan review. You have to get a building permit, and you can't get a building permit if there's no water. You know, so there are, there are components, and then you have to comply with the Wetlands Protection Act and all sorts of other things. It's not just, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. It's not that loosey-goosey.
I think one of the biggest issues is that, of going this route with a form-based code, is the predictability. That is the one thing that is missing in conventional coding. And, yeah, it's good if you have a planning board, which changes over the years, who might be on top of it. I wonder how many planning boards would have done at 133 Essex what this board did, for example. I think it was extraordinary amount of work. And what I'm getting at is that, for me, the whole idea of a process that begins with public engagement and visioning to create something that you'd like to build and make that predictable in a code is really a strong argument for getting things that you want. And that's really what you two try to do in this code. And I think, to a large degree, succeeded in the character aspect anyway. And,
From my own standpoint, being in front of other boards as an applicant over and over all year long, I notice the wide disparity, even within a township, going through the years. I've been doing this for about 40 years, watching like a conservation commission have really strong skills, and then it gets reconstituted in another term, and there's no skills. And then it goes back to some skills, and then it goes back to zero skills. You can't predict any of that stuff.
no,
So when you have a more defined code, and especially one that's in a sense visual, in other words, you can look at it and see whether you're complying, you can look at the numbers and see if you're complying. You don't have to rely on expertise to define whether this fits in a special permit criteria, which is often somewhat subjective.
You know,
This
that's
this
an
creates, this
excellent
But this-
evens the playing field,
Well, they-
so that when
Yeah.
your skill sets go up and down, you have an even playing field of rules.
Exactly. That's because I had the same professional experience in front of design review boards, zoning boards, talking about a project, and you could get any kind of response out of this committee, off-the-wall kind of comments that really are insignificant, they're off-target, they're whatever, and you've got to respond to it. And what I came around, because to believe in something like design guidelines, because, and by doing that, that requires that you put something in front of people to look at that says, this is what we're talking about, for guidelines. And they're advisory, they're not regulatory, but the idea is that you can't rely honestly on special permits. What a special permit will probably do is prevent the real disaster. If you look at all construction as a sine curve, you got peaks and valleys in the sine curve. On the top, great ideas, great projects to approve. On the bottom, not so good. And what special permits probably will do is take a little off the top and a little off the bottom, so you kind of get the middle strata, which is better than not having it. So it is better. But if you really want something predictable, you have to write a code to get you that. If you want it to be exactly the same, you write the code to do that.
And just remember, with the special permit process, there was an appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, Robin said to me she had never seen a decision like the one that we did in 133 Essex, but that didn't stop the appeal.
Right.
And on appeal, in the Superior Court, there was going to be a trial de novo. And at that point, we would have had to, as a town, called witnesses and the whole 9 yards. So the special permit, in some sense, it's a little overblown because we do have discretion, but when push comes to shove, that appeal process can tip a special permit. But to Emil's point, when you have something predictable, when you have these specific metrics, then that's what has to be followed. It's pretty black and white. And we did put in a little flexibility in this, too, so that if you have a really good project, some of these things can be waived.
Right.
But it actually provides much more certainty and much less chance that you're going to, the town will be dragged into some type of expensive appeals process.
And every board afterward is looking at the same data, so and then if the town decides it needs to modify some of that, you modify your bylaw
Right.
to fix it. And
There's two more questions. What happens if Harbor Light sells and the 3A units go in instead of Harbor Light? What happens to our affordable housing metric, and are we out of compliance? And then the other question is form-based code really a protection? Like, is there proof that it will be upheld in a 3A zone? Sorry, traveling, can't get on the phone.
Well, just right now, the articles, Article 1 in particular, is 3A compliant. So that's a fact. We have a form-based code. The executive office can only look at the 3A component and see whether or not it's compliant. And Mark has presented the drafts that UTIL has done to the executive office, and they have not. UTIL ran the models that the executive office has produced, and our zoning complies with those models. So the fact that the form-based code is incorporated in that is not relevant really to 3A compliance, and in some sense, the executive office would have no interest in challenging that. Why?
And what's as of right is the use, not a particular building, not a 10-story building. It is the use of multifamily housing as of right.
Right,
How you put it together then is up to the town.
right. And I know this has been said before, and it does tend to annoy people, but the 3A is a zoning requirement. It is not a building requirement. So right in the regulations, there's the recognition that this housing may never get built. And in the regulations, there's a recognition that the towns do not have to do one thing with respect to their infrastructure to facilitate 3A housing, right in the regulations. So, the day after 3A passed, if it were to pass, is not, by definition, run on development in town. It doesn't work that way. It's just a zone where there's that potential. But a lot of these communities, they're built out. They're built out. I mean, I don't know I don't know exactly where Ipswich put its zones, but you know where the Ipswich train station is. That whole area around there is pretty much built out.
Right, I wonder, though, EBSCO is, I think, becoming available, so, do we have something else, or was that it?
It was a thank you.
Oh,
Okay, so unless there's, I think we're just circling.
Power outage in Rowley, and Ipswich, and I must go.
Again.
Yeah, again.
what about the
like-
power outage? You keep having power outages?
The Rowley and Ipswich, so it's the National Grid substation in Georgetown that keeps faulting.
Wow.
Interesting.
Because of 3A. That's a joke.
It's
Strike that from the minutes.
Pat Norton, you're gonna be in trouble.
Okay, so this is our last meeting before I don't think we have another meeting before the 14th, no.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we-
exactly.
So we were kind of looking, we wanted to, only a few members here, well, not everybody's not here, but just to get kind of permission that because there will not be another planning board meeting unless you want a special one before the 14th.
I think Pat really
And
wants
if you're
one.
okay with, Jonathan putting together the
Thrilled
slideshow and,
Jonathan's doing it, and thank you.
Yeah,
yeah.
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 And I personally really endorse the form-based code. I think it will really inure to this town's benefit. And I think it's really significant that we chose a really unique and proactive pathway to have a vision for our town's future, unlike any other town.
Right, I love it, that we're doing it different. I'm just looking at the meeting schedule, so right now we have a meeting scheduled for the day after the special town meeting.
15th, yeah.
So you
Make a
can,
motion, we cancel the meeting on July 15th.
I second that
Second
motion.
You know,
Marty's not gonna be here, so.
I'm not going to be here, but.
you don't want to critique my performance the day after?
So
Post-game wrap-up?
No.
I urge you not to go forward with that, because my recollection is that we might have that really nice gentleman with the cell,
Communications tower.
the little cell tower. He may or may not be coming in. So,
But he would be just as happy to come in the next one.
Yeah.
He's not on the.
The next one is August 5th.
Yeah.
oh, wait, so July 15th, August 5th.
Sure, he's fine.
Oh, I wish we could just check with Mark to see if there was anything that he's holding on to in terms of time sensitivity.
I'm
That's
happy
my-
if you want to do that and let Mark, I mean, we've had meetings added ad hoc. so
We
I'm
can,
sure he
we can,
move one.
But we can cancel it, though, during the
Yeah,
course
why
of the.
why don't we just leave it, and
Yeah.
if there's nothing on the agenda
Yeah.
that isn't a continuation or something that has to be heard
Right.
within a certain notice period, I don't want to jeopardize that.
Right.
Then if there's nothing
yep,
that can't wait,
yep,
then we can go ahead, and I have no problem
Yeah.
continuing that. Because we've done yeoman's work these
Yeah.
past couple months. I mean, we've had,
We've
I think I've been
Met the
to
last 4 weeks, I think.
the last 4 weeks.
well,
okay?
and then you've attended how many select board meetings?
Maybe we
and
should have a continuance till September. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I second that motion.
I was wearing my Pat Norton hat.
I know, I love it.
So I'll communicate with Mark and see about July 15th. And
That sounds perfect.
And he may be able to move, if anything's there.
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
may get-
No, I think that's smart.
If there's something time sensitive, he can get
Right.
a waiver from anyone,
Right.
any applicant. So now we have the most important motion of the evening.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
So we also have to put away all the gear, it's on
Yes,
us.
yes, yes.